Welcome back to another chance to talk to someone who was exhibiting at Fully Charged Live. We are getting the opportunity to talk to a true hero. Not one who wears a cape, but one who is a member of CAPE. CAPE in this case being the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. For those of you who don't know, I am an ER nurse and I have spent the last 20 years more or less working in the ER. Slightly less, slight exaggeration there. And I have seen and read the research that shows that poor air quality is incredibly damaging to human health. And I'm not just talking about the poor air quality we've seen recently from forest fires and climate change, but the poor air quality that's kind of just part of daily living. The poor air quality that comes from burning fossil fuels in vehicles and in homes. So we were really excited to get the opportunity to talk to Dr. Curry about what they are doing to help transition us away from fossil fuels. Dr. Curry, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about what CAPE is?
Yeah, sure. So CAPE is an international organization. We've been around for 30 years. And so we advocate with all levels of government to create change and to create good policy to support transition to clean energy and to create action on climate change. And so we do have collaborations with international and national organizations, and we do that to be effective and work effectively.
So why is it that physicians and climate change are linked? For many of our viewers, they might not get that link. So can you give us an idea about what it is about physicians that links you to climate change?
Yeah, so, physicians and nurses are some of the most trusted individuals in our society. And when we look at research, people consistently rate the two of those professions as number one. And so, I'm a physician. I'm a family doctor, and in 2021, I had more than one patient pass away from the multiple climate disasters that happened that year. So we had the heat domes, then the wildfires, and then the atmospheric river. And so, during the heat domes, we have our most vulnerable patients are affected by heat domes. So those people who have mental health issues, the elderly, and people who have multiple medical conditions. And so heat domes increases risk of cardiovascular disease and basically, heat medical issues, and then again, death in the most extremist of situations. And then wildfire smoke, it affects people who have lung conditions, so COPD and asthma. And in terms of things that happen, we see exacerbations of asthma during wildfires and wildfire smoke. We see increased emergency room visits for burns and exposure to wildfire smoke. And then atmospheric rivers, there were a number of people who died in the atmospheric rivers. And then from the mental health point of view, with economic devastation that happened in BC in the Abbotsford area, that's something that affects people as well. So, in terms of the health effects of climate change, there are many things from a health point of view that are affected. We are seeing there's, reports lately about increased risk of West Nile virus and of Lyme disease. So we have, diseases that were only in certain places before moving further north. And then when you get to more of a widespread, zoom out view of things, when we have a climate change happening with wildfires and heat domes and natural disasters, if we continue going on the route that we're going to reach 6 degrees Celsius warmer by 2100. And that is going to cause mass displacement and, in fact, conflict. And, there are military officials around the world who are very concerned about this. And, CAPE is an organization that lobbies with governments. And so from a policy perspective, we really want our government governments to put in place good policy to avoid these health effects of climate change and to avoid these conflicts and displacement that will happen.
And I think it's really important, like people look at climate change and they tend to think, oh, the problems are going to be way down the road. But what we're actually seeing now is that the impacts are hitting us much earlier. And you talked about the wildfires here in BC, and obviously we've had wildfires across Canada this year. We've had wildfires, as usual, down the west coast, down in some of the east coast as well of the United States. It's really seeing that shift. And I know that CAPE has been lobbying. What are some of your big success stories?
Oh my goodness. So, we have meetings with MPs and MLAs all the time. And in terms of our success stories, I suppose it would be more creating those relationships and highlighting the importance of creating good policy and moving away from fossil fuels. And so with those relationships, we as physicians have a very strong voice. And, when MPs and MLAs meet with us, they are more likely to listen and more likely to move towards change, to move away from fossil fuels. So I think those would be our successes.
And so what are some of the projects you're working on right now?
Right. So nationally, we are working on a couple of projects. So the first one would be on the clean electricity regulations. So the clean electricity regulations are a set of regulations that are in their draft form with the national government right now. And they basically provide a framework to get to 100% clean electricity on our grid by 2035. And that's an internationally agreed upon target that we have to reach in order to get to net zero by 2050. And in their current form in the draft regulations, there are loopholes for fossil fuel companies across Canada. So for example, in BC, we have hydro, which, our electricity comes from hydro, so that is considered clean electricity. But when we look at other provinces, for example, Alberta and Ontario and Nova Scotia, they do have coal and natural gas. And right now in the guidelines, they are suggesting that it is okay to use natural gas with carbon capture and storage to be considered clean electricity. And so our organization is basically advocating with the government to close those loopholes because our world is moving away from fossil fuels towards clean electricity and clean energy. And we believe that if they continue to support natural gas with electricity generation, those will be stranded assets in 20 or 30 years when we are moving towards 100% wind, water, and solar, which there'd be multiple studies that have shown that it is entirely possible to do that across Canada if you use the energy storage techniques that have basically exploded over the past 10 years. So that's one of our national campaigns. We have a petition that anybody can sign if they go to cape.ca. And it does make a difference when people sign our petitions because we have meetings with MLAs and MPs all the time. And if we can show that we have so many voters behind us, they tend to move a little bit more on these topics. The other national campaign that we have is the Fossil Fuel Ad Ban campaign. And so with this campaign, we're actually approaching the Competition Bureau in Canada and asking them to put a ban on all new fossil fuel advertising. It's a stretch, but it is something that we believe from a health point of view is very important. We did put a ban on advertising for cigarette smoking, and we consider this to be equivalent because of the pollution that fossil fuels basically create. In terms of our provincial campaign, so in BC, we're working on a campaign, it's called the LNG Harms campaign. Right now, the fossil fuel companies have a campaign called the LNG Helps campaign. We heartily disagree with that. And so the LNG Harms campaign, we're asking to put an end to all new natural gas exploration in British Columbia. Many people don't know this, but there are 35,000 plus fracking wells in northeastern British Columbia. And when they frack for natural gas, they basically plunge all kinds of fracking fluid into the earth to break up the shale to release the gas. And when they do that, It contaminates local water tables with carcinogens, as well as things that cause birth defects, as well as, there are increased reports and evidence of increased visits to emergency rooms and increased heart disease and lung disease in the area. But not only that, when they frack for natural gas, there's basically leakage that happens at every stage of processing and development. And when the natural gas leaks into the atmosphere, it causes 86 times the warming effect of carbon dioxide in a 20-year period. And that, of course, causes heat domes and wildfires and natural disasters. And, in the short term, it's extremely important to prevent natural gas from leaking in order to prevent those natural disasters from happening.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really realize the kind of many impacts that fossil fuels have on your ability to survive as a human. They impact your health long term, whether or not they're being burnt right by you. So we have all these changes that are happening through climate change, but we also have lots of evidence that's come out over a very long period of time about the kind of things that we don't see, like the problems from fossil fuels being burnt in cities and the quality of the air being poorer because of that.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the questions that people might want to know is, with the changes that you're working on, how can we help?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So, in terms of people, in terms of the public, becoming involved with some sort of nonprofit organization that advocates the government for change and advocates for action on climate change, that's something that everybody can do. In terms of things that people can do in their own personal lives, reusing things, flying less, transitioning to using an electric vehicle or an electric bike or an electric scooter or whatever, what have you. And, that makes a huge difference, because in cities, like you say, we have air pollution, and we also have noise pollution from gas-powered vehicles, and that can have a huge effect on people's lives. And it's amazing when you're in an area where there's less noise, how people's quality of life improves. One other thing that people can do is consider flying less. If you need to fly for family, etc., then you might consider that. But everybody has their own personal reasons for flying, but maybe consider flying a little bit less. That's something that you can do as well. You can always donate to CAPE, to our organization. We do very good work, and we're always looking for people to give us donations so that we can continue our work. And if you're interested in joining CAPE, anybody can join CAPE. You can go to cape.ca, and we have newsletters to update people on what we're doing. And in fact, you could attend a provincial meeting if you wish to. Anyone is welcome to attend.
Thank you so much, Dr. Curry, for joining us, and thank you to everyone at home for watching. And on that note, we're done with today's video. If you have comments, drop us a polite note below in the Discord chat room, on Mastodon, or if you're a Patreon supporter, in the comments there. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links below to regularly support us with a YouTube membership or Patreon subscription. You'll also find links to our Ko-fi, Bitcoin, as well as our swag store and that aforementioned Mastodon server. Scrolling by on my right is our amazing list of charged up supporters, and shoutouts go to our V2G Patreon supporters: Alan Tupper, Andrew Martin, Bennett Elder, Brophy Wolf, Chris Maxwell, Cyprian Laplace, Dan Blair, Gordon C., Hay Esker, John Trammell, Kyle Fox, Mark Eggleton, Peter Dillinger, Regine Fellows, Sean Tucker, Stefan Fremgen, Stephen Williams, Tesla in the Gong, Paul Bricknell, Tony Moss, Kyle Hodgson, Chris Ascenta, Denny Hyde, Lance Charles, Linda Irish, Mike Weeder, and Paul Nelson. And finally, big thanks to our off-grid supporters: Paul Conway, Kevin Burrowbridge, Stephen O'Donoghue, Jim Burness, Robert Flannery, Aaron Hann, Ellery Hensley, Rory Litwin, JP Fagerback, Dave Kitchen, Andrew Glenn, Anonymous Freak, Chris and Michael Johnson, Clay Witt, CPU Freak 101, Eric Knack, Joe Bresney, John Henderson, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobnak, Nigel S., Reggie Watts, Will Graylan, and there's that other person, Ian. Don't forget, we make videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday on the main channel, plus a Sunday on Take Two. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you soon, and as always, keep evolving.